Hello there, and welcome again to Valorria live chat. We're going to be talking about Bad Batch tonight. So you may notice this is not our usual night, but now that we have episodes of The Mandalorian and The Bad Batch coming out at the same night, we've decided to split those two into separate streams on different nights. So we did The Mandalorian last night, fantastic episode, and tonight we're going to be talking about the most recent episode of The Bad Batch entitled Metamorphosis.
Yeah, a bit of fun doing back-to-back streams. We'll see how we go. We'll try and focus on Bad Batch. We've watched that a couple of times, but having said that, we've actually watched episode 1 on Band-Aid 3 times since it hit Disney Plus. But we talked about it yesterday. We'll focus on Bad Batch today. We'll see how that pans out. Having just watched Bad Batch, we've chosen a couple of trooper characters. These, I don't know what you've got a little lady. My guy's not even in game yet, so I don't play him quite as much, but he is my character that feels the most like a clone trooper, so that's why I've gone for this one.
Yeah, I've got a couple of characters that are probably a little bit more clone troopery than Valorria, but they are not level 80. It's going to just be a little bit clunky trying to play them together, so I decided to pick one of my troopers that's a little higher leveled. She's got this cool sort of splattered armor that I dyed pink to match her hair, so she's all ready to go with her pink. With your pink gear.
Consistent. Yeah. Very consistent in your styling there. I've done I've been semi-consistent in my my squad here because everyone's basically got the same armor with just helmet variations depending on the species, just for a bit of fun.
I find it particularly tempting for my trooper characters because you start off with Havoc Squad. I end up with basically all my trooper companions dressed up the same as my trooper, so we look like a squad. And I can see you've gone for a bit of a thing there as well with the sort of Imperial poncho, and my Alara is wearing exactly the same gear as I am, so that's why our characters look the same.
I find troopers the easiest to roleplay in some regards, so play them as by the book soldiers on the whole. Hence I kind of often go for the squad feel. All right, let's jump in. Where should we start? We're on Taris, which is a planet that's been bombarded in the past, but got rid of trees and a bit of...
Yeah. We'll start with Nightfall.
Nightfall, where we got that? I see it. So episode of Bad Batch was a fairly self-contained episode, but it hit on a number of plot points that we've discussed a few times in the past in streams and podcasts, which was a little bit interesting. Sees the return of the Zillo Beast, which we last encountered back in, I couldn't even tell you what season of the Clone Wars, but on Coruscant and the Clone Wars, and it's been past now.
Yeah, the Clone Wars has too many episodes to go, oh yes, I'll just watch the whole Clone Wars to remember all the things that happened every time we watch an episode of Bad Batch. So I find it's kind of a little bit better to just like go, oh, okay, it relates to that, and then go find that one specific episode and watch that. So that is on the to-do list. We haven't done that yet. To be honest, we were busy watching Mando again. But yeah, I definitely think we'll have to go back and watch that one. It might not be important beyond this episode. I don't necessarily know that we will see much reference to the Zillo Beast directly, but at the same time, I do think this was a very important episode. Not like it felt originally like it was going to be a bit of a standalone episode, but I think
there's a few things definitely going on. I mean, there's a few Commando characters and a whole lot of cloning technicians on Mount Tantus. I think that's not trivial, and who knows what that might tie into in the grand scheme of things, but in the short term it's just tying into genetically engineering and modifying Zillo beasts that the Emperor seems to just want for weapon to weaponize as weaponry type projects.
Yeah, I mean, but we haven't had enough sort of I guess full exploration sort of for the audience, beyond the script writers about why Palpatine seems to be messing with this.
No.
I must confess I was reading a little bit of the sort of online information to try and sort of backtrack and fill in some gaps, just to sort of, catch up on the sort of lore of the Zilla Beast. So I can't remember if this was said in the episode or what I read, that it was basically cloned while Palpatine was still Supreme Chancellor, before he was Emperor.
It was, he ordered the cloning,
Yeah.
Whether or not they succeeded with that cloning, I'm not sure, but that's potentially interesting. I might just explain, might simplify the explanation in some ways. He doesn't necessarily have something grand in mind. He might have just been looking at it as a pawn in his galactic war.
Yeah. Because we know that he's certainly, like, at the time of the Bad Batch, we know that they are working on the Death Star, but we don't, I don't think we've crossed past the testing of the Death Star in Rogue One. So at this point, I think he's still looking for big, as we say, super weapons to use to sort of assert the Empire's dominance. So I could imagine that he's like, oh yeah, a giant beast that I could just drop onto a planet and let it just destroy everything. If something's being too problematic, just unleash one of these on the population and basically wipe them out.
We're obviously very early in the era of stormtroopers, so that's quite a notable marker in terms of the overall timelines of the relationship to Rogue One and A New Hope, where stormtroopers are fully established.
Yeah. I have to say it was probably deliberate. The vibe at the start of it being very sort of spooky, obviously having strong references to Alien there. And then at the end, it almost felt a little bit like Alien, it's the Empire rather than a corporation, sort of wanting to clone deadly, almost uncontrollable beasts because of reasons. Not necessarily for money, but for perhaps military reasons. When it's like, you really shouldn't be messing with these things, but okay, they're going to clone them and want more of them, which always never really works out well. And it did have quite a spooky vibe to the episode. I know there's always like this sort of interesting mix of it's a cartoon and it's often sort of marketed for children, but then there are sort of these elements to it that feel a little bit scarier. I'm just going to find 3 more in the middle here. Before we click on those. And this was one of those sort of not darker and sort of like concept, but just, that kind of suspense that always just kind of feels eerie.
Not a full-on horror, but definitely intended to just be a little bit sinister, a little bit make you at least feel spooky from the character's point of view. They were a little bit on edge.
Because, oh my gosh, it made me anxious when Tech's like, oh yeah, I'll just go off by myself, I'll be fine. I'm like, I'm like, we're down a few members by choice, Bad Batch. I don't want to see them like accidentally lose one.
No, I don't think they would. I think they were thinning out their ranks just a little bit too much at this point. So they've only got 3 soldiers in Omega.
And speaking of that, they did actually reference Echo and Rex right at the end.
Yep.
Basically, once they figured out what was going on, they're like, "Oh, we'll let them know," and I'm like, "Yay!"
I think it was even a shade more than that, if I remember correctly. It was we'll send them the data to see what they can find out, which kind of implies a bit more communication than just sending it off and for the sake of information. It was sounds like they'll be in touch with them again. Yeah,
which I thought was fun because I was like, it could be a while before they reference them again, or sort of meet up, but that seemed to imply that, we didn't actually have to wait too long before they're talking about getting in touch with them, which I was like, that's nice. And I'm sure there's like an episode between this one, or at least before we, get back to them. But it started out thinking, it's like, okay, so we've got another instance. I thought it was interesting because right off the bat, we're like, okay, Sid's got another job for them. But we're like, me as an audience member, I'm feeling like quite suspicious about Sid and her motives and things like that. And we saw that the Bad Batch were not too impressed with the fact that she didn't seem to want to help them.
No.
And they reiterate that again to her face. Via holocord, you know what I mean.
Yeah, we've talked about this a few times because it first cropped up directly in that that pod racer sort of episode where other underworld characters were talking about her reliability and trustworthiness. And then in the last couple of episodes, we saw her essentially abandon them when they were stranded on the mining planet. So we talked about, where's that going to go? Because is she going to ultimately stab them in the back?
Yeah, well, as we see,
this time, Echo spelt it out. He straight up said that, she's got them. Tech spelt it out. He said that she's got them between a rock and a hard place because she can essentially rat them out if they don't follow her bidding.
Yeah. Which is kind of like initially she's like, oh, I'm like sympathetic to clones and I'll help you out. And we've gotten to the point where she's basically blackmailing them. Go steal stuff from me so I can profit or else I'll rat you out to the Empire. And that's where we're at. And that's not a situation that I think they're going to let continue on. Especially not when they want to do things because it's the right thing to do. And she's like, nah, profit. Those two sort of worldviews are not going to work together. So I don't know how it's going to come to a head. Or basically she's going to be sort of in the background as a lingering threat.
No, I don't think. I got the feeling that we're up to, what was that, 12 or 16 episodes we've just seen now. And was it Hunter, or it might have been Tech again, that said they'll try and find a diplomatic solution, and he referred to this as being their one last job. They actively want to sever ties with her, I think. So
which is so interesting because they don't really have a base as such. But I think they've kind of figured out that, there's no point in her helping them when she's actually putting them in more trouble than helping them.
Yeah, and their relationship with Rex now might come more into play if they're independent from her.
Yeah, they've got someone else in the galaxy that can help them should they sort of need specific assistance or somewhere to hide.
Resources or whatever,
He's clearly been running around the galaxy without having sort of like the same sort of issues.
Or a patron.
Yeah. He seems quite resourceful. So I like that. Oh, he's just respawned.
Okay.
And of course, I was quite excited to see that we've finally touched on the point of Omega being hunted again.
That was kind of a big deal because again, it's another thing we've talked about on occasion, sort of wondering to what extent her uniqueness might come into play. And they spoke to it directly as being a pawn to leverage Nala Say's assistance, which the Empire's not having a lot of joy with at this point. It was fun seeing all the new characters on Mount Tantus. The male scientist, I think he's going to be a really interesting character moving forward. He's got a really cool.
Go to Rakghoul release.
Yep, he's got a really cool way of delivering his lines. It felt so much.
He was very sinister
Than just an animated series.
Yeah.
But let's not forget that one of the female technicians / scientists that was working with him was voiced by Keisha Castle-Hughes, a Kiwi who has been in Star Wars before.
Yeah, she rose to fame, certainly locally here in New Zealand, from Whale Rider. And then she was cast in episode 3, playing Queen Opilana. We only see her in the funeral for Padme Amidala, and she has no dialogue in that. So it was really interesting to see her cast in an animated show, Star Wars show, because the accent, stood out to me immediately. And I thought, oh, is this Michelle Ang, who voices Omega, doing like a slightly different voice for a different character? Because it sounded slightly like a New Zealand accent. And then we got to the credits and we're like, oh, okay. It was right on the Kiwi accents, but not on the specific voice actors. Yeah. And she had quite a lot of lines, and this looks like a character that will continue on. So personally for us as New Zealanders, that was really exciting. I have met her at a convention, you know,
Here in New Zealand.
adding, you know, the New Zealand actors to my collection of New Zealand actor Star Wars autographs. So that was really quite exciting.
That was very cool, I thought.
But I thought it was interesting that they basically referenced Omega not because of her, like, her position as a clone or a genetic material herself, but because of Nala Say's connection to her attachment, and that if they can threaten Omega, then Nala Say will do what the Empire wants, which is an interesting thing.
Wasn't quite sure how to read that, whether it was just a personal connection or the sort of scientific value that she had to Nala Say, or a combination of both.
To me, it felt like it was because if they have her, then she's basically going to go, okay, don't kill her, I'll do what you want. Because she was like, I failed to see what you've got in it for me. I can just rot here in jail for the rest of my life, and you guys are the ones that lose out. So that's how it read to me. I guess we will see, you know, further down the line how that plays out. It was a little bit sort of sad to see the other Kaminoan just basically rat her out that fast.
That was Lama Su, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
the Prime Minister. Yeah. He's basically like, here's a way to basically get her to do what you want, not sort of like, I stand in solidarity. I don't know whether he basically saw a way to save himself, because they seem to kind of non-Symptoons threaten him without sort of saying it out loud. And he's like, actually, if you want to get her to do something, here's what you do. And then they're like, cool, let's talk. So I guess we can just take that as politician gonna be a politician, that they're gonna always work in their sort of self-interest before the greater good, certainly in the Star Wars galaxy. But yeah, I thought we've got this interesting new, because we don't really know whether we'll see anything more. I'm gonna get some more dudes before we click that. If we'll see anything more of Rampart, we know he was arrested. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of him. But I like that we've kind of got like this new focus on the Empire side. Still haven't seen Crosshair.
No.
But we did get sort of, we're both really quite fans of the Republic Commando design. It was fun to see them, albeit in obviously a sinister.
Yeah, it's fun to see them, but yeah, I wish they hadn't all gone Imperial, and it was kind of.
Well, we don't know necessarily, because we saw Scorch. I don't think we've seen all four of that original Republic Commando thing, so we don't know if those other ones were like, oh hell no, and let's gap it and just go do something else. But it was certainly implied at the end that we haven't really talked much about the Zillow Beast, that they basically rounded up all of the locals, like whether they saw it or not. And it kind of sounds like they might just eliminate them all.
Well, Scorch straight up said they're going to deal with them. Yeah.
Which sounds pretty sinister. Or whether they're basically like, hey, we've got free people, let's use them as test subjects. I don't know. You think that they just like execute them all there on the planet if that's what they were going to do? I don't know. It was an interesting sort of, or whether they just wanted to be a little less brutal right in the face of children. The adults understand, they're not going to be looked after. And the kids kind of goes over their head a little. But yeah, it was one of those intriguing ones that I wasn't expecting it. Sorry, I'm going to go to Fall of the Locust. I wasn't expecting it to be sort of so, like, I know that as we get closer to the end of the season, we're going to have to progress the storyline in bigger sort of jumps and not do these one-offs. But the vibe of the show, of this episode, didn't sort of let that sort of become apparent until much later, which I thought was really interesting. I was like, okay, we've got like creepy beast episode.
Well, okay. I forgot that it was quite a big bonus mission. That's one of 40. Yes, no, the Zillow Beast itself, I think, was almost it was just a vehicle to tell a slightly more complex story in some ways. Sure, it was sinister, and it may play into bigger things down the line, but it wasn't that huge a threat. We saw it growing at a surprising rate, but it never actually got to the villages.
See, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just thinking, we don't necessarily know why Sid sent them after it.
No,
we don't know whether she knew that there was
the wreckage. Yeah,
she didn't like. When they get there, they're like, okay, they figure out that there's a beast. It gets out, and they're like, sort of, I don't know, just that kind of good, doing the right thing Republic soldiers. They're like, okay, we let that out, that's on us, we got to get it back and do something to it. You know, they're not like, never mind, let's go raid the ship for wealthy like, you know, credits or whatever, and go back to Sid because, you know, she's blackmailing us. They go after it, and it becomes pretty apparent that that the Empire kind of knows, because they send an awful amount of weaponry and starships, and they have a ship that gets there with a sort of a beam weapon that can either stun it or weaken it or put it to sleep or whatever it is, to subdue it to the point where they can basically grapple it onto the ship and put it in a giant tank. Now that means they knew what it was that they were going after. Yeah. They knew it was probably bigger. And they had like a team of Republic commandos as well.
It was the same sort of scientific laboratory type, because they talked about the experiments being done off-site. So I wonder if they, and the way that Omega talked about the tech on the crashed ship, they actually had devices for harvesting genetic material, which is not something that wasn't just about transporting the Zillo beast on that starship. It sounded like a mobile lab. Yeah, because
some of Omega's dialogue made it sound like she was aware that they did some cloning off Commando. Mm-hmm. And that makes it sound like the Empire knew all along, like, okay, we're going to use the Commandans to do what we want. And then once we get a little bit of a handle on the situation, we'll kind of destroy it all, but we'll have the tech that we need off-world already.
Yeah, exactly. Destroying Tapoka didn't eliminate a resource that they can actually use.
No, they just made sure that the Commandans don't have it anymore, that they are the ones that control it.
Yeah, and that actually cropped up in the dialogue, and I can't actually remember who said it. But the purpose of destroying Tapoka was straight up to control the tech.
Yeah. And she made reference to there being certain experiments or technology that Nalase kept secret from her. Yeah. That she was privy to a certain amount of it, and we don't know who else might be aware that she has knowledge of the Commando and cloning tech. She might know how to run it. She might have, you know, the insider knowledge akin to somebody that had worked in the labs. Obviously, there is a certain level at a higher point that only perhaps Nalase knows about. And that is why they've kept her alive. Because even Omega wasn't privy to it. We certainly know that she was doing some off-the-books cloning experiment. I can't imagine that Omega was an officially sort of sanctioned experiment from the Galactic Republic's viewpoint. That feels more like a Kaminoan mucking around, you know, with the cloning tech. So I thought that was really interesting. That perhaps the Empire isn't aware of her. Because he was basically like, oh yeah, there's like a clone girl. Whether or not that sort of came as a surprise to the sort of, you think the scientists that were sort of, you know, doing the...
He didn't seem to bat an eyelid at the notion that it wasn't just a Jango Fett clone.
Yeah, a girl, which would imply a young one and female. Or whether he's just sort of got that sort of composed imperial demeanor. But I thought there was so many interesting conversations. that really feel like we're getting a sense of where the main plot line is really going to snowball towards the end. But at the same time, having things like the Zillow Beast being one of the components of this. Sorry, I'm just trying to get through the cutscene. Brought it back to the Clone Wars again. I know people always reference the fact that these feel like, just a continuation of the Clone Wars. And then, referencing something as iconic as the Zillow Beast and having that one sort of make a return. Because, going by the information online, the Zillow Beast was created when George Lucas was still involved with the Clone Wars storylines. So it's something that he sort of had a personal hand in. So it's kind of fun when something that, George Lucas was behind reappears in other Star Wars content. I think that's neat. And it is a sort of an interesting, formidable creature. It was definitely creepy in this episode. Figure out which way to go in this map.
Yeah, sounds like they toyed with bringing it back during the Rebels era, but didn't quite fit it in. So
yeah,
sounds like Filoni likes the idea of it as a adversary and a planned plot point.
Of course, now I'm really fearful for Omega, because we know that tensions are not great. If they, at the same time, because Bad Batch do not know that suddenly there is a massive target on Omega's back. If they decide, okay, Sid, we've had enough, we're splitting. If she gets wind that the Empire is looking for a clone girl, that could be it. If there is like enough of a bounty on her head, she could be like, okay, they screwed me over and left me. I'm gonna screw them over and give up the girl. It could be. Yeah, perhaps this is the thing that kind of explodes that situation, and then they would find out that Sid was basically the ultimate betrayer. Because I don't know if we'd see her go head to head. She doesn't come across as particularly skilled in combat or sort of blaster use herself. She's definitely the scheming type. But I think that would be interesting because she is one of the, I don't know how many people, it's not like we've been sort of keeping a tally of how many people are aware of Omega's sort of, that she is a clone. A lot of people have met her, but they don't necessarily know she's a clone. She just looks like a girl, and not everyone would put two and two together. Total elimination. Because I keep, every episode I'm like, I wonder if that's ever going to come back around, or whether that's just sort of like a threat from the earlier episodes. But we're definitely seeing it come back. But not for the reason I thought. I thought it was going to be because I thought it was perhaps a little too close to the Grogu storyline in The Mandalorian. There is something specifically unique about the genetic material, that is why Omega is wanted. She's basically a pure example of the original clone DNA.
Yeah, right. It might feel a bit repetitive.
Yeah. Because yes, I'm sure that has to come to a head in The Mandalorian. We know that the Empire wants Grogu for genetic material, blood, which could also, we know that the scientist is a cloning expert. It might just be, people might figure out that both the Mandalorian and the Bad Batch are about, a special child, and the Empire wants to clone them. If you sort of reduce it down, that seems a little bit, unoriginal, perhaps, if that is the basis of both shows. Of course, we know that cloning has always been, obviously in A New Hope, it references the Clone Wars, but in a lot of the sort of older expanded universe era, there was often references to cloning. We know that the Clone Emperor was a factor in the Thrawn trilogy, going all the way back. and you know, we know.
Well, that's where Mount Tempest originally came from memory. With Thrawn novelizations.
Yeah.
Thrawn novels.
And obviously that became a core component of the sequel trilogy as well, The Rise of Skywalker. But I'm not sure if we'll see because Mandalorian is between the two, so potentially in the background. Because I'm always wondering. We get a lot of connection. I mean, this is jumping around. And this isn't spoilers for the most recent episode of Mandalorian, so if you haven't seen that, don't worry. But the underlying thing of, you know, Moff Gideon talking about that they want Grogu's blood and stuff like that, and they've got a cloning scientist. If they'll ever reference, because this is between original trilogy and the sequel trilogy, so at some point in this, we know that there is cloning efforts for Palpatine, where we see him in, and we can't imagine that somebody's just like ho hum, and then like 2 years before we see it, they're like, oh yeah, let's clone Palpatine, that'll be a thing. It had to have been something that was basically being worked on since the moment of his death.
Well, it might have been his backup plan.
Yeah. Basically, like, here's my backup plan in case somebody decides to you know, backstab me or something like that. I'll have a backup plan. You know, and puts all these puzzle pieces in place, which are then sort of activated upon his death. We missed the first one. Oh dear, so distracted. But I'm wondering whether we'll see, or as an audience, be given a hint of that in The Mandalorian. Because we get obviously the sequel trilogy is beyond The Mandalorian. It's harder to make connections to something in the future than it is in the past. You know, we see things like N1 and references to things from the prequels. So it'll be interesting to see if any of these threads about cloning in these two shows sort of give us a larger hint about where the Empire and later on the First Order eventually go.
Yeah. Or if it's just a notion that it's an ongoing tech.
Yeah, that the Empire just wants to amass power, and anything that gives them power, like being able to make a clone army, they want to make sure that no one else in the galaxy can do that. Basically, you know, steal their playbook and go, oh yeah, that's a way of making a big force of troopers very quickly.
Even though the Kaminoans are the experts, and it doesn't seem to be anybody else capable of tuning out clones at the military level, no one's really that surprised by the fact that they were able to do it.
Yeah, it's not like, that's impossible, you can't clone people. Yeah. They're just very good at it, you know? It's like one of those things like, oh, you can clone like animals, but cloning a person is, you know, entirely different. That's quite complicated. You've got, you know, thoughts and memories and personalities and whatever else. Did you just ding? Yay!
Indeed.
Cool. I will go do Fallen Stars. Wrap up Taris. So I can only imagine that it's a powerful sort of technological resource. You know, they keep population suppressed, and if a population is like, hey, we can make like more people, then that gives them a power that the Empire doesn't want them to have. So I can see them wanting it from just a make sure we have it so no one else does context. But at the same time, I feel like they want it for a specific reason.
Well, it does let you modify things with the Zillo Beast. Well described as being modified, this version of the Zillo Beast.
Like why were they making it like worse? Like in terms of like making it harder to kill. You know, are they just trying to basically go, oh, let's see if we could do this and test it out and see if they can actually make it work? Like basically choosing which elements of sort of the genetic profile they can edit, or whether they're just basically trying to make like a super alien, make something that's like even worse. Like, you know, okay, it's already pretty hard to kill. What if we make it even worse? but it's an animated show and I need more details. Oh, mine thing still says investigate crash site. Ah, there we go.
Mm.
Okay, I got it now. Did you get it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, I'm ready.
Cool. Okay, up the hill. But yeah, I was just so intrigued by the fact that, oh, I didn't mean to grapple them out of your way, sorry. I thought I was clicking mine. Storming one. That I know it's something we say a lot, but it makes me really interested to see what the next episode will be. I feel like we're going to start to really see some conflict erupting. I'm hoping we see Rex and Echo again. Not necessarily having them join up, although I wouldn't be averse to having Rex just be like, hey, let's just join up permanently. And there was something I think that we were thinking about the other day. Well, certainly I was. In the Mando sort of timeline, we have Boba Fett. That's not a spoiler, you know, everyone should know that by now if you're watching Star Wars. And if Boba Fett is an unaltered clone in terms of the aging, then that means that wherever Boba Fett is in the galaxy, unless otherwise harmed, Omega would be the same age, and alive.
Just miles down the line, yeah.
Yeah, because we were thinking about it when we were watching one of the Mandalorian episodes, and they sort of reference, you know, Boba Fett's voice and it being the same as the clone troopers and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, well, Boba Fett's like an adult here. We don't necessarily know whether all the clones are like just died off from old age. At this point, you know?
Did you do this one?
Huh? Oh, no, I didn't. I'm just on automatic pilot here. We don't really know if there's clone troopers running around. You know, whether they would be elderly, whether they just kind of mature to a certain age and they just like live out decades of life at that age. But we at least know that unless we discover a storyline telling us otherwise, that she would be alive and somewhere out there. Which is a little bit sad because I guess on some level she knows that she's going to outlive the Bad Batch.
Yeah.
She's older than them, but in terms of like, you know, how long her physical body's going to last, she's going to outlive them. Because I would be fascinated to see a live action Omega. Let's just be personally because I love the character. We do see them sort of fond of overlapping things. Because without getting too much into speculation, we can assume that there will be... We know that animated characters have jumped over into The Mandalorian. And we can assume that we will see, I mean, based on some of the casting announcements, I won't get into that, for the Ahsoka. And we know that certain animated characters are going to make the jump into that, which makes me wonder, okay, does that mean we might see Bad Batch characters jump into live action in other ways? I think that would be interesting. Yeah. Because we're seeing, at least from a fan perspective, it really feels like Disney is trying to sort of connect all these loose threads. It makes it easier for fans to understand, well, like more newer fans, casual fans, to put the pieces all together, I think. Where do you want to go next?
Let me just check. I can do CZ. We could probably time-wise a quick CZ run to work.
Sure. But I like all the sort of complicated threads that this most recent episode has kind of started to tug on.
Yeah, it did open up a few doors there. But things that are better, I mean, that we've certainly talked about and speculated about, and I'm sure it's cropped up in other people's minds along the way, of course. Someone's cleaned the path for us.
Yeah. Ah, they're just ahead. I can hear it.
Yeah, we'll have to
Oh, good.
catch up
Are
on
they
our
going
numbers.
to... They're going to stay in here? Yeah, they're going to stay. That's fine. We'll go down here. I kind of like... It's always a little bit messy when we've got like styles shows overlapping, but in some ways it's kind of good to know that when Bad Batch finishes, we've got the Mandalorian, you know, we'll be going on with that as well.
Yeah,
though I do think it was an odd choice to have them overlap quite as much.
I don't know. I think so as well, because they postponed Bad Batch. We're down to 3 weeks left because the last two episodes will be screened on the same night. So not a lot of overlap. Less than half of Mando. Oops.
I mean, sometimes when it comes to Lucasfilm, Disney, I'm never quite completely understanding some of their sort of business decisions in terms of release dates and things like that. You know, I guess we'll never really know why Bad Batch was delayed like it was. Why Mandalorian didn't start screening in December, as everyone kind of expected them to, because December has, you know, traditionally been when they would release the live actions. And considering we're going to have like, I mean, I guess we're just going to have to find out and see how much TV we've got lined up for the rest of the year.
We got a couple of things happening on May the 4th, but I think that is the date for Visions.
Yes. Because I wouldn't think of the kids show as being significant enough to be worried about overlapping.
I don't think that goes into the scheduling now, but it will be coming out at that time as well.
Have we done the boxes? I think we've done the boxes.
Yeah, I just need the cold drink containers.
I'm going to go into this room, pick up a crystal, because my character can pick them all up. What do you pick up?
Everything as well.
Oh.
And Ahsoka and Skeleton Crew are this year as well, just the second half, and we don't have a confirmed date yet. So yeah, there's the times without live action or Star Wars in general is going to be fairly brief this year. It is the sort of craziness that we've talked about in the past of an overabundance of Star Wars.
Just thinking about, sorry, just jumping back to the start of Bad Batch. We find out that Bad Batch's usual commission of the missions they do is 30%.
Yeah.
And Sid basically negotiates up, basically concedes to give them 50%, which seems like overly generous for her character.
I think that
and
reflects on the value of the wreckage.
Yeah, but at the same time, they're like, oh yes, it landed kind of close to a village. That's why it was reported so fast. But at the same time, not necessarily. The village doesn't seem to be aware of it. There's no one near near it, which makes me wonder whether she is plugged into Imperial channels and heard them about them desperately trying to, like, you know, gotta go get the ship. There's valuable cargo on board or something like that. Or perhaps she wanted to get there first and sell it to the Empire, you know, basically like, haha, I've got what you want, now pay me for it. And if that's the case, then she is aware of Imperial chatter, Imperial communications. Did you get something up here, did you?
No, I've got 3 out of 6 cold drink
Oh,
containers.
sorry, yes. Okay.
Because they're only on this level.
No, I was just talking and walking and not paying attention. Unfortunately. Okay, we'll go back to here and this one should respawn.
It's fun down the end.
There we go. Boom.
Yep.
But I'm inclined to think that she is aware of Imperial chatter.
Yeah, I think so too.
They didn't seem suspicious of why she knew about it, but later on when you get to the sort of location and it's just abandoned, you know, it just seems a bit suspicious that she would be like, okay, I'll give you 50% because this is important, and it's just a random crashed ship. There's nothing else on it of note apart from Azilla Beast and Commando and cloning tech. And, you know, both of those are important to the Empire, not necessarily to anyone else. So I get the feeling she knew. Which makes her potentially willing to sort of bargain with the Empire? I don't know. Like, I don't know how to phrase that. You know, like she doesn't have an issue with
no, she just works
bargaining with, you know. Whether she knows that Imperials would have deep pockets, be willing to pay a lot of money to get something like that back. But,
well, clearly they are. They mobilise quite a lot of resources to hunt it down.
it's always sad seeing, like, I keep waiting for the moment that we stop seeing Clone Wars era ships and start seeing things like TIE fighters, but I know that that's going to come as slowly as the progression between clone trooper armor and stormtrooper armor. We've gotten to the point where it's like, let's make stormtroopers, so they're not going to suddenly have TIE fighters at the ready. You know, it's always kind of sad to see things like the gunships and the V-Wings and stuff like that, all the classic Clone Wars. I'm like, oh, that used to be the Republic.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of ships. They deployed a lot. And the other thing that I forgot was that they knew that a ship escaped, that they basically wanted no one on this planet to know what had gone on, but they were aware that one ship escaped their grasp. So they're not just after Omega, they are also going to be hunting the ship that escaped that planet. So I guess the Bad Batch would be aware that the Empire knows that they, or the Marauder shuttle escaped the planet, but they might not necessarily know that they're going to be hunting them down, you know, beyond the just sort of usual Imperials want to hunt them down. And not just Sid knowing that Omega is hunted, but if she catches wind that the Empire is hunting for a Marauder shuttle with some people on board, that also puts them in harm's way.
I wasn't quite sure at the end to what extent Bad Batch saw the Empire take all of the villages.
Yeah, because you think that they would have perhaps tried to stop that somehow?
Yeah.
You know, they're not the sort of people that goes, oh, sucks to be them, let's get out of here. You know, they would try and help. Because we see them sort of rejoin. They pick up Tech and Omega, who were sort of running around the crashed ship.
Yep.
While Hunter and Wrecker were trying to shoot down the Zilla Beast from the sky. So certainly, I don't think either of them saw what was happening in the city. Any of them. So I think that is a secret. We know that the Empire doesn't exactly falter at the thought of just executing a lot of people for its goals, but they do seem to try and not let it be sort of so well known that they're willing to do that. You know, they still want people to think that they're all about law and order, not just like mass murder. I mean, I think half the point of getting rid of all the people there was that no one could have information that could be used against the Empire. They clearly want no one to know about it. Oh, my inventory is looking a little full. As usual. Did that count for you?
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
They seem to fully fix that.
Cool. Some crafting stuff. Cool. Got some bits and pieces that are useful. And you dinged a level.
I got a level and a half out of all that, yeah.
Oh, nice. Cool.
Right, so, well, I think that's hit most of the points about the Bad Batch. It's kind of good doing 2 streams back to back, because it means by the time we have the second stream, we're already one day closer to the next round.
Yes, that is very true. I'm just going to go back to my house so I can put some stuff away. Yeah, and I think also under normal circumstances we like jump straight into streaming, having watched it, and it takes a little while to sort of absorb it. Having watched the Bad Batch episode yesterday and again today, had a bit of time to kind of think about some of the things.
Yeah, that's true.
Which I find works a lot for the Bad Batch. Mando, there's always like, if you don't watch it like straight away, then there's going to be spoilers on the internet, you know. Not necessarily with the first episode, but we're certainly going to see that a lot going further down the line. We're going to see, it's going to be basically all over the internet, so you got to best beware. So I find that one especially is one that I want to jump on and talk about straight away. I think, like you said, I think we covered all the sort of main points that we particularly noted in the episode. And I can't wait for next week's episode. I can't see how they would be able to get away with just a filler episode at this point. I feel like they have set in motion some fairly significant, and now that we know that the Empire is after both the Bad Batch as the ship that escaped the planet and Omega as the clone to use as leverage with Nala Se, I don't see how they could just like go on a random mission.
No,
when basically the whole underworld is going to get word that, I mean, because we know the Empire uses bounty hunters in that. It's going to not be very long. I mean, they want to use Nala Se pretty quickly. So I feel like they're going to make it a matter of urgency to find Omega. So I feel like there's going to be like a giant target on their backs.
Well, there's that. Foreheads. They're almost certainly going to go back to Ord Mantell, so they're going to have a face off with Sid. Yeah. That's going to come to the boil.
Yeah, because they escaped off the planet. And she's like, if you don't get anything of value, don't bother coming back. And they escaped they didn't steal anything. So that, you know, she's going to be like mad, you know, that they keep going out and doing missions and then not making her wealthy. So I feel like it's really going to come to a head. And then that's going to starting the sort of snowball rolling towards the finish line, which I'm very excited about seeing where this goes. Because it's a little bit, we don't really have sort of like a multi-season idea of where Bad Batch could go. And I feel like this next couple of episodes, we get more of a definitive feel for the longer story for the Bad Batch, where they'll go.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I mean, I don't think they'll wrap anything up. They'll leave it open-ended, but as to what extent it hits a cliff or a cliffhanger would be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Not too long to go to find out everything for this one. And it's always fun to jump on and stream and talk about the bits and pieces that we found interesting. So thank you to everyone that came along and listened to us talk about the most recent episode of The Bad Batch. We'll be doing this again next week with the same 1 day delay so that we can dedicate our normal time slots to The Mandalorian, because there's always like a lot to break down in those, and it just starts getting messy if we're trying to talk about 2 random episodes, and we simply don't have enough time to watch them both and then stream and talk
Yeah.
about them both and everything.
If you missed our Monday chat, that's still up on Twitch, and it's also going to be archived permanently over on our YouTube channel, so you can subscribe to if you want to check out that chat and previous chats and upcoming chats, of course.
So I guess we'll call it there for tonight. I certainly had a lot of fun, really enjoyed this episode, and can't wait for next week of the Star Wars goodness on Disney+. So catch you next time, and in the meanwhile, may the Force be with you.
Yep, take it easy, everyone. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.
If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like, check out our other videos, and subscribe for alerts about new uploads. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.